It seems like just 2 days ago he was a newborn. Isn't that what parents say? And here we are, 2 days after our celebration of the birth of Jesus, and he's a 12-year-old adolescent, disappearing on a trip with his parents and then arguing with them once they find him. Sound familiar? When our kids were little more than newborns, we began an annual tradition of hosting Christmas dinner for our friends, most of whom, like us, had no family in town. What with our friends from church and their children, and then our children's friends and their parents, and occasional family members showing up from out of town, we had upward of 50 people in our home some Christmas evenings. And until 2 years ago, we were still doing it. The parents have been friends for 35 years, and it turns out that the adult children treasure our connections as much as we do. Back when the kids were small, we had a process that involved the children eating first. The food was set up buffet style in the kitchen. The tables were in the living room and the dining room, and some years even in the hallway. And of course, the little kids needed help filling their plates and finding their way to a seat. And then the adults could get their food and relax for, 5 minutes. But this worked out until one year when we had a total transformation. The kids got their food, they went to their seats, the adults went into the kitchen, and there was no food. Okay, there was some food. There was a tiny bit of food. You could have a little tiny piece of turkey and a little dab of potatoes and the tiniest sliver of pumpkin pie. And I did a quick calculation and realized that year we had at least 8 14-year-olds. And they were all athletes. They were all soccer players or hockey players. And the ones who weren't 14 were 13 and 15, and you know where all that food went. Needless to say, that was the end of the kids eat first rule. We had to adjust, right? And related to children, as always, we had to be flexible as their needs and ours changed, along with their capacity for consuming every morsel of food in sight. We've made other adjustments as well. Some years we've been unable to host, and other families have taken the reins. Some years we've experimented and the menu has varied. Now that those kids are grown, some of them stay home or go to other grandparents, and some of the parents go visit them. It just depends on the year and the circumstances. This year, I was out loading up on food on Monday morning and emailing everyone to cancel everything on Tuesday morning. It just depends, right? Now look at Jesus, whose family had a tradition. Their tradition was that they went to the temple every year for Passover. Mary and Joseph were excellent parents, passing on their religious traditions to Jesus. And while synagogues dotted the landscape, houses of learning, the temple, the place of worship, there was only one, and it was only in Jerusalem. So, if you could afford the money and the time, you tried to make your way to Jerusalem for the religious festivals as often as you could. Jesus' parents went every year, the Bible tells us, for Passover. But we see that their family dynamic is changing, as it does for everyone. They lose track of Jesus. People went to those events in big caravans, some walking, some riding on animals, bringing their food, celebrating with their neighbors along the way. Today, we would simply freak out if we lost a child in a department store. But at that time, it wasn't unusual for this big group to go together and the children moving about from family to family. It's not that surprising that they would lose track of him for a bit. Although we can imagine 3 days of looking for him, they must have been pretty panicked. Their tradition was being broken apart by their son's actions. Why are these traditions so important to us? Whether it's Christmas Eve at Old Stone Church, or family gatherings, or annual pilgrimages to the temple, we had so hoped to gather for our Christmas dinner this year, as we have for 3.5 decades, every year except this one and last. And I think that all the cancellations have been even harder this year than last. Last year we didn't even try, but this year we were getting ready. We had our plans, and then it all fell apart. Those traditions and rituals are so important to us because they are the glue that holds us together. Family and friends, neighbors and co-workers, church members and church visitors and friends. We're going to hear a hymn in a few minutes about the longing to return to what we have known, and about the challenges of finding Christmas and loving and serving and giving from home. Challenges because these traditions and rituals are also the grounding, the foundation in which we grow and become the people God has made us to be. This story of Jesus in the temple tells us, I think, 3 things about ourselves, our grounding, and our becoming. This story of a boy growing into himself and a family having to rethink how it does what it does tells us, first, that we are called to nurture significant relationships in our lives, the most important of which is with God. Second, that we are called to roles that may distinguish us and separate us from those who love us and whom we cherish. And finally, that we are always called to grow in wisdom as well as in years. First, we are called to nurture significant relationships in our lives, most importantly with God. We can see this in Mary and Joseph, who have been faithful partners and excellent parents in the way they have brought their son to Jerusalem and taught him their faith. And we can see that Jesus, a willing participant, has a good relationship with his parents. But we see also that his relationship with God, his Father, is becoming of greater importance to him. Now, we are not Jesus, and his developing participation in God as Trinity, that is not our call. But growth in relationship with God and with others, those are experiences to which we are called. And this story invites us to wonder what that might mean for us. In addition to nurturing relationships, Jesus demonstrates that we are called to roles that may distinguish and separate us from those who love us. It can be a shock to parents to discover, as Mary did, that a child is growing up and away to a life unforeseen by that parent. I have thought many times that Mary must have longed for Jesus to find a nice girl, settle down, and produce a family. Certainly she is angry enough that Jesus comes straight home and continues his life as an obedient son, at least for now. But for all of us, parents and children alike, struggles, both external and internal, ensue as children take steps for becoming who they are meant to be. In Bible study this week, we talked about 2nd century Bishop Irenaeus, who is famous for having said that the glory of God is a human being fully alive. The glory of God is a human being fully alive. But getting to that state of full aliveness can be a challenge, one in which upset mothers often play a big role. Do you remember our first Sunday of Advent, that the message that came to us was stand up, be vigilant, and be bold? Jesus in the temple at 12 years old is right there, standing up, vigilant and bold, not only in his preparation, but in his discourse with the rabbis. He is taking on a new role and building new relationships as well. And finally, Jesus not only nurtures relationships and begins to find his own path, he grows in wisdom as well as in years. And I hope that we all do as well. He goes home with his parents. He has more to learn. And if the last 2 years at home have taught us anything at all, it's that we have more to learn as well. More about patience, more about courage, more about healing, more about prayer, more about giving and serving. Let's not underestimate this hard work. I am finding every day that the small tasks of care and justice are far more important and far more difficult than what look like the big tasks of worship planning and preaching. Maybe that's a lesson of COVID. Maybe it's a lesson of aging, maybe both. But it is the small part of wisdom that I have to impart. Those small tasks, those moments when we have to do more than we think we can, those moments where tempers explode and doors slam, those are the moments in which wisdom grows. I hope this other bit of wisdom, or at least learning to impart today, as I have this one other bit, as wisdom and learning to impart, as 1 year ends and another begins. I've been thinking a lot about Old Stone's current time of transition. And I think these same 3 principles of becoming apply not just to each of us as an individual, but to the communities of which we are a part. Our families, our friends, our workplaces, our congregations. I want to invite us to think, just as beginners, about what Jesus in the temple has to teach us in the Old Stone family during this time of transition. First, a congregation, a church family in transition, must nurture its significant relationships with God, among one another, and with the world outside our doors. We must nurture these relationships in prayer, in conversation, in study and learning, and in action. Second, a congregation, a church family in transition, must take steps to distinguish and separate itself from the past. This is as difficult for a church with as long and storied a tradition as Old Stone as it is for children and parents. The past, which grounded and formed us as much as those Christmas dinners did our friends and their families, it's a valuable resource, but it's not our future. We must be heartened by the reality that the glue which has held us together will continue to stick, even as we make way for new possibilities. And third, a congregation, a church family in transition must grow in wisdom. We have the years. We have 200 plus of them. What we need now are more wisdom and more patience and more courage and more healing and more prayer. More of the grace of God, which is always, always available to us. Did you not know, asked Jesus, that I must be in my Father's house? It is difficult to be in that physical house right now. As we care for ourselves, our families and friends, and those who serve us, particularly in the medical field, it is difficult right now for us to be in those places so precious to us. But wherever we are physically, we and our church can grow our relationships. We can grow into ourselves more fully alive. We can grow in wisdom, and we can proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ, newborn baby, boy in the temple, and Savior of the world. Amen.
Thanks for watching our video. Make sure to subscribe to get the latest and greatest videos from the Old Stone Church. And if you feel blessed by our message, please go to theoldstonechurch.org and click to donate. God bless you today and forever. The Old Stone Church. We've been loving Christ and serving City since 1820.